At 15, I was navigating my first serious relationship in a quiet, upper-class neighborhood where everything seemed perfectly safe. My girlfriend Clara lived just 2 blocks away, and I walked to her house almost every night. It was a route I knew by heart, a peaceful stroll under the streetlights. One Thursday night during a school break, I started my usual walk. The air was calm and a gentle breeze rustled through the trees. It was late, but the neighborhood's stillness felt more comforting than eerie. Soon, that comfort started to fade. The first sound was a slight rustling, a disturbance in a hedge behind me. I glanced over my shoulder but kept walking, thinking it was just a stray cat. When I reached the next block, I heard a different noise, the distinct snap of a small twig. I stopped and turned around completely this time. The street was empty, bordered by the same neat rows of hedges. Nothing. The quiet was almost too perfect. I picked up my pace, my heart now beating a little faster. As I approached the final stretch to Clara's house, I heard it again. Footsteps. They were quick, light, and right behind me. I turned again without stopping, my eyes scanning the darkness. Still nothing. The fear was a physical presence now, cold and sharp. I fumbled for my phone and called Clara. When she answered, I told her how freaked out I was by the noises I kept hearing. I walked around the final set of bushes at her driveway and onto her property, my eyes fixed on her front door. I noticed her looking out her bedroom window upstairs. She waved, still on the phone, and I waved back. Then she said the words that would make my blood run cold. "Who is that guy right behind you?" My body went numb. I spun around. Just 10 feet away, a man was crouched low, watching me. He was fully grown, but moving like an animal. A terrified scream erupted from my throat, and I bolted for the front door, pounding on it with my fists. The man was on me in an instant, a hand grabbing my shoulder, trying to pull me into a headlock. I struggled, yelling for Clara. The man let go just as quickly as he had grabbed me, turning and running back into the darkness. The door flew open, and Clara's mom pulled me inside, slamming the door shut. Clara came rushing down the stairs. I was gasping for air, my heart a frantic drum. Clara's mom hugged me, and after I managed to explain what happened, she called the police to warn them about the man. She insisted I stay the night. The next day, she drove me home, but that walk and the chilling look on that man's face would be burned into my memory forever. It was a dangerously stormy night. The wind howled and the rain came down in sheets, making the world outside feel distant and muffled. My family was all doing their own thing. My parents were in the living room, my sister was upstairs, and I was in my room watching TV. I usually loved nights like this. The thunder and rain made me feel relaxed. But that feeling shattered when a monstrous bang erupted against my window. I jumped up, looking outside, but the downpour blurred my vision. A figure was out there, a frantic silhouette against the streetlights. He started pounding, and I could hear him screaming for help over the noise of the storm. I cracked the window open, and a blast of cold, wet air hit my face. "Please, I'm hurt," he yelled, his voice strained and desperate. The rain was too loud for me to make out anything else. I screamed back at him to go around to the front door, and as soon as I shut the window, I ran into the living room to tell my dad what was happening. Just as I finished, loud knocks and shouts echoed outside our front door. My dad started to open the door, but a sudden sense of dread made me stop him. "Wet," I said, not sure it was a good idea to let a stranger in. The phone rang, and our next-door neighbor's caller ID flashed on the TV screen. My dad raced to pick it up, and I heard him say, "No way." My stomach dropped. I knew something was wrong. He hung up, his face pale. "Stay away from the door," he said, his voice low and serious. He didn't explain, just went to the window and peeked out. He came back, his eyes wide. He had seen the man crouch down, pounding on the door with a large, sharp tool in his hand. My dad yelled through the door at the man, telling him to leave before the cops arrived. He was already on the phone with 911. The man eventually gave up and disappeared. Later, my dad explained what the neighbor had told him. A man had been rummaging through his shed and came out with a large chopping axe. The cops found him a few days later, and his story made the local newspaper. When I was a little kid, maybe 5 or 6, my house felt like a castle. It was a big old place with a basement that was just a dark, dusty abyss, filled with things my parents had forgotten about. One night, I was in the living room, my little world confined to the warm glow of the television set, where my favorite cartoon was playing. I had the volume up pretty loud, lost in the bright colors and silly voices. But even over the noise of the TV, I thought I could hear my mom calling my name. The sound seemed to come from downstairs, a faint but distinct, "Ben, come here." I called back, "What?" But there was no reply. A moment later, I heard it again, a little clearer this time. "Ben." Curiosity mixed with a bit of a kid's impatience. I paused my cartoon and went to the top of the basement stairs. The lights were off, and the darkness below was absolute. It swallowed the light from the hallway, making the space feel like a mouth opened in the floor. I called out, "Mom," and waited. There was no answer. I thought maybe she had gone back upstairs. I started to turn around, deciding to go find her. But before I even got to the top step, the voice came again. This time it was right below me, a clear, unmistakable call. "Ben, down here?" The hairs on my arms stood on end. My heart started to beat a frantic, panicked rhythm against my ribs. I knew with every fiber of my being that my mom was not in that basement. I had seen her go upstairs just a few minutes ago. A chilling, irrational fear took hold of me. I scrambled back to the top step, turned on the light to the basement, and peered down. I still couldn't see anything. The sound was so real, so much like her, that I started to wonder if I was going crazy. The voice came again, from deep in the darkness below. "Ben, what are you waiting for?" This time, it had an edge of impatience, a low, drawn-out call that seemed to tug at the very air around me. Pure, unadulterated horror washed over me. I ran from the stairs, my legs pumping, my body shaking. I screamed for my mom, my voice raw and choked with tears. She came rushing down the stairs from upstairs, her face a mask of concern. I cried to her, telling her that something was calling me from downstairs, something that sounded just like her. She swore to me that she hadn't been calling me at all. To make me feel better, she went down to the basement to check. I watched her from the top of the stairs, still trembling. She turned on the lights and walked to the bottom, looking around. She came back up and told me it was empty. I didn't feel better. I'm sure she didn't believe me. Why would she? I was just a little kid. But I still know what I heard. That voice, calling my name from the darkness, was exactly like my mom's, and it was waiting for me. I never went down those stairs alone again. The memory of that voice and that overwhelming feeling of dread stayed with me, a permanent fixture in my childhood home. It was a lesson that the most terrifying things are the ones you can't see, the ones that sound like the people you love. That old house held many secrets, but that day it whispered one just for me. My grandpa, Walter, recently told me a chilling story about a walk he took with his dog, Daisy. He lives on a farm, a peaceful place about 2 hours from us. He and his wife, Eleanor, had a Boston Terrier named Daisy. Every morning, Eleanor would walk Daisy, and in the evening, my grandpa would. One evening, as the sun was setting, Walter was walking Daisy down their usual dirt path that ran alongside the woods. He passed another person on the trail, a stranger with a large hood up. Daisy barked and pulled on her leash, as most dogs do when they see a stranger. My grandpa said hello, but the person just walked past without a word or even a glance. My grandpa and Daisy continued their walk. Daisy, however, kept looking back and barking. My grandpa would try to shush her and yank on the leash. Eventually, he turned around to see what had her so worked up. The stranger was there, a dark figure watching him from behind a tree in the distance. My grandpa picked up his pace, a sense of dread now replacing his earlier calm. He always carried pepper spray in his big coat pocket, just in case. He was getting closer to the house when he heard a new sound, clicks from the leaves on the ground, just inches behind him. Before he could turn, he felt the warmth of a gloved hand cover his mouth and nose, preventing him from screaming or breathing. He could hear Daisy barking and biting at the stranger, and he thinks that might have loosened the man's grip a little. He struggled to grab the pepper spray from his pocket, and when he finally did, he sprayed it at least 10 times. The man let go screaming in pain, and my grandpa ran as fast as he could back to his house. He was perfectly okay, but he never forgot that moment of terror on a path he had walked 1,000 times. I grew up in California, and for the first 14 years of my life, my neighborhood wasn't the best. It was an area known to be home to members of the Crips, a street gang. My best friend Jace lived 2 doors down. We spent most of our time together riding our bikes or playing video games. One night, when we were 12, we decided to visit a well-known abandoned house. It had been empty for years, no one would buy it. When we pulled up on our bikes, Jace pointed to a window. "Look," he said. I nudged my bike closer and focused on it. A person's face was peering out from between the curtains. It was extremely strange, but we stared, and we noticed something else. The face didn't move. We inched even closer, onto the empty driveway. It appeared to be a fake head, a Halloween decoration. This meant someone had snuck into the house to put it there. Jace and I, being the mischievous kids we were, decided to sneak in through the back and check the place out. We hid our bikes behind an overgrown bush and crept into the yard. To our surprise, the back door was already unlocked. We figured someone must have broken in to put the head there. We stepped inside but didn't turn on the lights. It was dark but not pitch black. We made our way to the living room to check out the head. The room smelled terrible. I picked the head up from the windowsill and immediately dropped it, screaming. I dropped it not because it was heavy, but because it felt like real skin. A dark liquid poured out from the bottom of the head and onto the floor. It was blood. It was a real human head. We stared at each other, our mouths hanging open. Then, we heard two cracks from the ceiling above us. We ran for the back door, got back on our bikes, and got the hell out of there. We later learned that the head belonged to a victim of the crypts, left there as some kind of message. There was a good chance the person who placed it was still in the house because we both heard cracks in the ceiling, as if someone was coming downstairs. I live in a quiet, rural area, a place where the closest neighbor is a mile down the road. It's the kind of place where you know every car that drives by and every knock on the door is a planned visit. That's why when a guy came to our house at 9 p.m. last year, the unexpected knock was an instant source of anxiety. It was dark outside, and the only light came from our porch. The man was dressed in a simple button-down shirt and khakis, and he held a clipboard. I went to get my mom, and she cautiously opened the door. The guy had a friendly, practiced smile. He started his pitch, his voice smooth and confident. He talked to my mom about how he was starting a new business, one focused on selling American-made products directly to customers in rural areas like ours. He went on and on about the quality and how it was a way to support local industry. He seemed a little too eager, his eyes shifting around the interior of our house. It was unsettling. He then handed her a container of what he called a new, eco-friendly cleaning product, a brand that looked exactly like a bottle of Clorox, as a sample. "Just a little something to show you the quality," he said, the smile never leaving his face. He told her he wanted to show her the star product, a quote-unquote vacuum cleaner he had in his minivan. He walked back down our long driveway towards his van, and my mom's eyes followed him. That's when she saw it. Through the windows of the vehicle, she could make out the shapes of 5 other men sitting inside. Their faces were shadowy and still. They weren't looking at him, they were all looking straight at our house. A flash of pure, primal fear crossed my mom's face. She instinctively knew something was terribly wrong. Her calm facade shattered. She turned to me, her voice a hushed but frantic whisper. "Sarah, run and get my phone. Now, we don't have a landline, and my phone was somewhere in the house." I fumbled around, but in my panic I couldn't find it. I grabbed a kitchen knife instead and stood around the corner, ready to defend us if I had to. By the time I returned, my mom had already acted. She threw the container of cleaning product outside onto the gravel. "Get the hell off my property!" she yelled, her voice trembling but firm. "I'm calling the police!" The salesman's smile vanished. The van roared to life. He and the 5 other men peeled out of our driveway in a cloud of dust, and we never saw that car again. We were shaken, and the lingering dread of the encounter stayed with us for days. The experience was a stark reminder that even in the most peaceful, isolated places, you can never truly let your guard down. We still have that knife in the kitchen, a small, cold reminder of the night we nearly had our doors kicked in. I've always been an extreme sports person, from mountain climbing to scuba diving. But I've always been an avid skier. I'd go upstate at least 10 times a season, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends. My friend Ethan agreed to come upstate and go camping with me so we could do some backcountry skiing. This meant skiing outside of a resort's boundaries, in unmarked areas. It was a 3-hour drive, followed by a decent amount of off-roading. I parked my truck at the bottom of a good-looking area because I couldn't drive much further due to the trees. Ethan and I unloaded our gear and hiked about a quarter mile. We found a perfect place to set up camp in a clearing near the bottom of a hill. We set up the tent, unloaded our sleeping bags, and started our hike up the hill to scout the area. At one point, Ethan and I lost each other while skiing down a hill. I figured I'd meet him at the bottom or just find him. I checked the walkie-talkie, but he didn't answer. While I was walking with my skis at the bottom of the hill, I ran into another skier. He sounded friendly under his ski mask, asking where the best hills were and if we were camping. He had his skis strapped to his orange backpack. I pointed to the hill I had just skied down and then in the direction of our camp. He said he and his wife were trying to find a good place to camp near other people and asked if I could lead him to our campsite. I really didn't want to trek back, but I felt I had to be a good Samaritan. I told Ethan on the walkie-talkie that I was going back to the campsite for a bit. Static filled the speaker. The connection was bad. I started leading the man who was walking behind me. When we reached the campsite, I turned around to him and smiled under my ski mask. He thanked me for him and his wife. Then I asked him, "Where is your wife?" He didn't answer. He started to walk closer to me, his pace quickening. My eyes were drawn to his skis and backpack. They looked exactly like Ethan's. For a split second I thought, is this Ethan? Is he pranking me? But it wasn't possible. The voice was too different. The man was a few feet away now. I panicked and jumped into the tent to grab my flare gun from my bag. The man grabbed my leg, and I felt a sharp, intense tingle, like an electric shock, followed by a burning heat. I screamed in pain as I pulled out the flare gun and aimed it at the man. He backed up, putting his hands in the air. That's when I noticed the knife buried deep in my leg. I ordered the man to tell me where my friend was. He answered quickly, saying Ethan was near the bottom of the hill. I told him to stand still while I called 911, but he took off. I felt like I was waiting forever in the cold with my bleeding leg. Finally, I heard the reassuring sound of a rescue helicopter, and I shot my flare gun into the sky. I was picked up, and they located Ethan laying in the snow. He was unconscious, and he had been stabbed twice and robbed. He had tried talking to me on the walkie-talkie while he was losing consciousness, but the connection was bad. We were both fine today. I lived in a small college town where the apartment complexes were a mix of students, young professionals, and a few older locals. My own building was a worn brick structure within walking distance of the main downtown area, a hub of bars and restaurants. It was the kind of place where you could feel the energy of the nightlife on a weekend, but on a weeknight it was mostly quiet. One Tuesday night, I was in the middle of a late-night study session. My textbooks were spread across the floor, and a sense of intense focus had settled over me. Around 2 a.m., I felt the need for a break, a quick cigarette to clear my head. I grabbed a pack and stepped out onto our small front porch, taking my textbook with me and laying it down on the top step. The air was cool and still, a welcome contrast to the stale air inside my apartment. I was just about to light my cigarette when I noticed a girl walking up the sidewalk. She was new to the building, living in the ground floor apartment one door over from mine. She was alone, and from the way she was walking, you could tell she had been drinking. She fumbled with her keys for a moment, finally getting her door unlocked. She barely got it closed before a guy seemed to appear out of nowhere, stopping her from pulling it shut all the way. He was tall, with a casual hoodie pulled over a simple t-shirt. I couldn't make out his face, but his movements were smooth and practiced. He knocked on her door, and she opened it again, a look of confusion on her face. He introduced himself, his voice too cheerful for the dead of night. The situation felt instantly wrong. Who comes to a random girl's apartment at 2:30 in the morning? I decided to stay outside and pay attention. My heart started to beat a little faster as I watched their interaction. They ended up talking for over 10 minutes. The girl later told me how uncomfortable the situation was, but she hadn't known how to end the conversation. I watched in disbelief as the man performed the creepiest things, a series of calculated gestures meant to disarm her. He reached up and stroked her hair at least 3 times, his hand lingering for a moment before dropping away. He would try to slowly inch his way closer to her and into the doorway, a subtle, predatory move. He would compliment her hair, her eyes, her neighborhood. It was all a performance, and it was sickening. I knew I had to do something. I made a point of being loud with my textbook. I grabbed it, flipped through the pages with a loud rustle, and coughed loudly. I made sure to let him know I was there, that she wasn't alone. He paused his conversation, his head tilting toward me for a moment. He saw me, and for a split second, a look of frustration flickered across his face. Then, as eerily as he had come, he turned and disappeared into the night. We called the police immediately, and the next day, they had the girl and me sit with a sketch artist. I described his eyes, his height, the way he moved. The sketch was made public, and within hours, floods of calls came in from other girls who had experienced something similar. The guy turned out to be a serial rapist who followed lone girls home from bars, pretending to be a cab driver offering them a ride. This girl just got lucky because she lived so close to the bars. He didn't get a chance to pull his cab routine. My simple action of making noise likely saved her. It was a sobering reminder that danger can appear in the most ordinary moments, and the most terrifying stories are the ones that could have been your own. I've only used Craigslist once in my life, and that one time gave me a very sour taste in my mouth. A guy posted an ad for a ping pong table that I wanted to buy. We set up a time for me to pick it up that night. I removed the back seats from my truck to fit the table. I pulled up in front of the guy's house and texted him, "I'm here." I saw the door open, so I got out and walked quickly to his front door. I went for a handshake, but he didn't seem to see my arm. After a few awkward seconds, I put my hand back down. He said in his deep, smoky voice to follow him to the basement. The whole house had a distinct smell, not exactly bad, but a cottony, smoky scent that I couldn't place. We got to the basement, and there was the ping pong table. Suddenly, he said, "Oh, shoot, I forgot the paddles." He ran back up the stairs and told me to wait. I waited for a while. I figured he misplaced the paddles. I started to snoop around a little, looking at his pictures. It was weird he had framed pictures, but they were all of just him. 10 minutes went by, and I was still stuck waiting. I started to get more nosy. A drawer on his utility desk was half open. I pulled it open and saw old Polaroid pictures. They were horrific. The pictures showed a girl tied to a chair with tape over her mouth. Next to the photos were yellow folders labeled A to Z. I took out my phone to take pictures, but I didn't have any service down there. It was time to go. I ran to the door at the top of the stairs, but my nightmare only got worse when I found the door was locked. As soon as I tried the doorknob, I heard the man on the other side. He apologized, saying the door was accidentally locked and that he would go look for the key. I didn't say a word. I examined the keyhole, ran back to his desk, grabbed 3 screwdrivers, and started trying them in the keyhole. The smallest one fit in the lock, allowing me to turn it just enough to unlock and open the door. I ran out, jumped into my truck, and drove to the nearest police station. I showed them the pictures and gave them the address. That was enough for them to start an investigation. A few days later, I got all the information. The man was part of a child pornography ring. I have no idea what he intended to do with me, but it was obviously not anything good. I used to babysit in my teenage years. When I was 14, I got a job babysitting a 6-year-old boy named Leo. His parents didn't give me many instructions other than to order a pizza for dinner and not let him go in their room. They also made a strange comment about how Leo acted differently than other kids and that he would talk to himself or his imaginary friend. It was midday, and it was pouring rain outside. I was watching a show while Leo was on the floor playing with his toys. He kept using the name Eleanor. He would act as if he was playing with another kid who was sitting in front of him. One of his toys, a little cube with a crank, activated on its own. It was the kind of toy that would take effort to activate, but it just went off by itself. I asked him how that was possible. He looked at me and said, "Eleanor is playing with it." I have to admit it was a little disturbing. I picked up the toy and turned it off. Later that night, I was in the bathroom washing up when I heard a knock at the door. "Leo," I said. I opened the door, but he wasn't there. As I looked into the hallway, a door at the end of the hall started to creak open slowly. I turned off the lights and walked into the room, expecting to see Leo playing around, trying to scare me. Instead, he was sitting on the bed in the far corner of the room, looking at me. I asked him, "Who just opened the door?" He said, "Eleanor." Now I was truly freaked out. I picked Leo up and took him to the living room, where I spent the rest of my shift. I didn't mention any of the weird things that happened, but when they reached out to me to watch him again, I never called them back. Do you believe in unexplained phenomena, or do you think there's always a logical explanation for things that go bump in the night? Share your thoughts below.